Welcome to the Increase Your Reach program. Evan DiDio here. By the end of this video, you're going to have a clear understanding of what your church needs to do next on social media to actually create a lasting impact. But before I introduce the guests that I have today, I want you to let me know in the comments, is your church on YouTube? Let me know in the comments, and let me know why or why not. Maybe you're not on there for a certain reason. I want to know in the comments, are you not getting that much engagement? I think we're going to fix that today, though, because today I have a very, very special guest with me. Very few people have really impacted my life in such a way that I will never forget it. Today I have one of those people on here. He is the co-author of the best-selling book, YouTube Secrets, the CEO of the hit YouTube channel, Think Media, and along with several other YouTube channels, and the brand new YouTube channel and podcast, video podcast, Think Marketing. Would you please welcome in the comments, Sean Cannell. Mr. Sean, how you doing today?
Evan, I'm super fired up to be on the show with you and to connect with your community.
Yes, no, I'm so excited. And for those of you that are watching, be sure to stay tuned till the end, because I think the last question I'm going to ask today is a doozy. And of course, there are timestamps in the description if you ever want to look around and to answer specific questions, if you have any specific questions. And also, if you do have questions, put them in the comment section below. This is a community here on the Increase Your Reach program, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have. But before we get started, can you go ahead and tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started on YouTube?
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. I've been on YouTube now since 2007. The first YouTube channel I ever started was for my local church, and I got my start in the local church. Now, it was back in 2003. My youth pastor handed me a camera and said, "Hey, start making videos for Wednesday night youth group." And your first videos are your worst videos. These videos were terrible. For anyone who's been in the audio video arena for very long, we shot on a Canon HV20 with mini DV tapes. I used Adobe Premiere like 1.0, Creative Cloud with the CDs. And I just started making videos. A couple years later, we started a YouTube channel for the church. And now that's 14 years, since YouTube started in 2005. I've been on YouTube for that long. And today, it's crazy to have over 2 million subscribers. And I help a lot of people with tech kind of questions as well as YouTube strategy. But over the years, have helped churches with their YouTube channel, have helped a lot of ministries or pastors that maybe want to get the word out about their book or Bible study. Just leverage this power of YouTube for reaching and impacting people.
Yeah, it's really awesome what you're doing on Think Media, on Think Marketing. Of course, I'll have everything linked up in the description below. So I highly recommend everyone that watches this video, you need to subscribe to three places: Think Media, Think Marketing, and the Increase Your Reach program, this channel right here, bringing you more media tips and tools for churches. This is so exciting, though, because what you have done is proven. And it's proven in my life. Our church, I've connected with you a little more than 2 years ago, I think. I started watching your videos, had no clue what affiliate marketing is or was. And I just started watching videos and started learning from you. And one day I asked my pastor, could I try a few things on the YouTube channel? I just changed, it was a terrible thumbnail, but it worked. More than 1 million views later, just on that single video, things started taking off, interviews taking off, hundreds of thousands of views, almost with every single upload. And we've been actually making an impact. And that's why I think this content is so important, because we need to start making impacts and reaching people, not growing, not looking for more butts in the seats. We need to start reaching people where they are on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever that might be. Now, a lot of churches have the idea, well, there are 30 different social media platforms: YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Clubhouse. I can't even name them all. And their first thoughts are, well, we need to be on all of them. And they try that for a little while, and it doesn't really work for very long. It's like trying to chase two rabbits. You end up catching none of them. So what platforms do you think we should be focusing on as a church that will have more impact?
Yeah, I think that it's important to define what season you're in. Eventually, I would actually argue someday you should be on all of them, because it's kind of like, how many different ways should we try to reach people with the gospel?
Yeah.
All of them. Paul was like, I will become all things to all people so that I can reach some. I'm going to leverage culture. I heard a pastor once say, we're going to do anything short of sin to reach people.
That's good.
And it's like, if it's the radio, let's use it. If it's TV, let's use it. If it's the written word, let's use it. And today, if it's social media, let's use it. Now, saying that though, you have to audit your resources. And so leaders are listening to this. You've got human resources. Is it just you? Do you have some interns? Do you have some staff members? Do you have a church budget? Or what is your budget? Do you have a budget to hire somebody else? Is there somebody you could promote? Is there somebody you could encourage to volunteer and pick a piece up? You have to audit your resources. Your resources are time, money, and people. And a good leader is going to think about what is the objective. And then they're also going to think about what's the best use of my resources for today. So when resources are limited, and guess what? They always are. So you never want to think, oh, I just don't have the same resources as somebody else. No, at every single level, your resources are limited. You just have to decide, okay, for today, what should I do? And my recommendation is to start simple. Complexity is the enemy of execution, and creativity thrives in simplicity. So I would try to create a simple plan for my church and really put that on a napkin, meaning not a large piece of paper, not a 10-page document, but on like a small sticky note. What could be your game plan for, if you will, content and social media? If it was me, I would probably focus actually a lot like my church here in Vegas, which is probably a good church to look at, I think, on the execution of a simple plan. It's a 3-year-old church, City Light Church in Las Vegas. It's pretty much YouTube and Instagram.
Yeah.
Facebook as well, because why not? And sometimes there's Facebook Lives during like 7 days of prayer or something. And a lot of times our senior pastor, Jabin Chavez, will go live on 2 phones, or a phone and a laptop or iPad. And he'll go live on Facebook and Instagram live at the same time and lead people through like a Bible study or prayer every night. But the 2 main platforms are Instagram, because I would say we reach multi-generations, but definitely kind of a contemporary church. So a lot of people on Instagram for the day-to-day. And then YouTube's where the content lives. Like YouTube is where the sermons live. It's where sometimes they'll upload a leadership night. And it's only a 3-year-old church. Our church does some music, so they'll upload a song that's been edited well, a little bit better with the audio. And you could check that out at City Light Church on YouTube. But I would keep it simple. So I would pick 2. I would really think, what are my and what's my main platform and what's my support platform? Now, platforms also have different purposes, because YouTube is like an archive as well as a chance to reach people. It's an archive for people to reference your sermons, and your content and your messages. The main thing that most local churches do, the pillar piece of content, is that weekend sermon. And now, as I even say that, to me, it's you also are extending that on audio. You should have a podcast as well. And this is just in service of your congregation. They can get the video on YouTube. The video can play on people's smart TVs or on their phone while they commute to work. And then they can also jump on to Apple Podcasts and potentially all the podcast platforms. We use Buzzsprout as a way of just distributing it across Spotify, Apple. And so I've already said enough to make somebody new to this a little bit like, man, it's a lot. It's kind of overwhelming. Yeah. So keep it simple. Like, don't try to do a ton of things. Try to get the weekend message out. And then here's my biggest recommendation is, if the weekend message is kind of your key pillar of content, treat that as like the top of a pyramid that trickles down, because it's out of that message that snippets of content could go out throughout the week, potentially an IGTV, an Instagram TV, that's 2-3 minutes, 5 minutes of a complete thought that either not your goal is not necessarily to move somebody from Instagram to YouTube. Your goal is actually to meet them right on Instagram and serve them right there with maybe something that's actionable, something that triggers their faith, triggers their prayer life, encourages them. Middle of the week's already been beating them up a little bit. So you're hitting them with some content that a lot of people won't leave Instagram. Like, if they're there, like, right, instead of shopping and trying to slide into some girl's DMs and do something they shouldn't be doing, what they should be doing is be reminded, of Jesus. And so if you can give them some content right there in their Instagram feed. So keep it simple. And then lastly, I would say, I don't think enough. I mean, I do think they think this way, but I think one of the biggest things creative directors and churches need to grow. In fact, every leadership position of a church they need to think more about building leaders and less about doing the thing themselves. That's really the difference between a leader and a technician, is that the technician is obsessed with perfectionism, a little bit of ego. They don't think anyone else can do it better than them. They're not great at empowering people. They are a bottleneck to projects getting done. They edit. You're overwhelmed because you see yourself as the only way of accomplishing a project, but you got to adopt a leadership mentality to realize it's about empowering others, equipping others. Leadership at the highest levels of the church casts bigger vision that raises more money so that more people, because provision follows vision. So I think the vision of a church should be to have full-time media ministers on staff eventually, because we do have at our fingertips tools that are incredibly powerful to put out video podcasts, YouTube videos, more creative content, content that is reaching our church, but is also reaching the world and reaching people outside of the church, music, whatever. And if there's different mantles on different churches, but I definitely think that for me, I've struggled with that again, I want to do everything. And if a new social media platform, when I was coming up, came along, I was like, oh shoot, how am I I'm already working so hard. No, you got to cast vision. You got to raise leaders. You got to equip people. You got to train people. You got to get people subscribing to this podcast and this video podcast. Yep. You got to teach people to be learners themselves. And the truth is that leaders, real leaders, create leaders, not more followers. And so your goal is not to have people being like, wow, look at how good you are at social media and YouTube and content. The pinnacle of real leadership is that less people would even know you, and you are accomplishing the work through the hands of others that have bought into the vision, that are experiencing the significance and satisfaction that comes to their soul from building God's house and building the kingdom. And there's different levels where you have to be the results level leader first, where you are doing the stuff, but immediately, like here's a crazy thought. I know I've been on this rant, but I just finished Joshua and went into Judges. And one of the crazy things about Joshua, I'm reading the John Maxwell Leadership Bible, NIV, can't recommend it enough. He said, there's a little blurb, right, from John Maxwell, and it said, Joshua was basically a perfect leader. I mean, nobody's perfect, but like he fulfilled, it says he did what God told him to do. I mean, that's the ultimate goal of leadership, or any of our own callings, is like, what did God call me to do? He accomplished what God called him to do. And he goes, but he had a major leadership flaw. He didn't install another Joshua.
Wow.
And what followed Joshua? Judges. And at the end of Deuteronomy, you see Moses laid his hands on Joshua. And it actually says the spirit that was on Moses came on Joshua. Joshua had been sitting outside of the tent, had been being equipped, walking with Moses. Listen, they weren't the same leader. They were very different. Moses was diplomatic. Joshua was a warrior. Moses had a certain type of leadership. Joshua had a different conquesting type of leadership. But nevertheless, Moses was an effective leader, made more mistakes, arguably, than Joshua. But Joshua's biggest leadership mistake was not succession. So even for you as a young leader, this might sound crazy because you're not even close to, you've barely taken off the plane from the runway. But a lot of leaders, senior pastors, someday start thinking, man, who's my Joshua? And I honestly think they probably ask that question way too late. They start asking that when they start going, man, my back kind of hurts. I'm 45, I'm 55, shoot, I'm 60. Who's my Joshua? Bro, you should be asking today, who's my Joshua? As soon as you start your job, your role at the church, day one. And that's hard because we actually want to be the best sound guy, the best cameraman. We want to be doing this stuff. And the reality is you'll be doing this stuff together potentially for decades. Like it would be great if you could meet your Joshua today and they get to sit outside of the tent while you meet with God for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years. You know, if God willing, someone sticks that long in your ministry, helping with media or whatever. And eventually, but like, I think one of the biggest ways, all the way back to how many platforms should we be on, it's getting a spirit-filled, passionate, disciplined young person, hard to find, not a lot
very.
like you. And I mean, not trying to flatter, but I mean, like you're an incredible young leader. Obviously, you've got a powerful family, and executing a kingdom mission on TikTok. Should you be on TikTok? Yeah. Should you be on Clubhouse? Yeah, doing Bible studies. There should be revival on Clubhouse.
Yes.
Of leaders that are like, but TikTok and Clubhouse is probably a distraction if you can't even get your YouTube channel's message consistently uploaded every week in a quality way. You've spread yourself way too thin if you can't do a few basic things. And so there's the practical today, but then build leaders for tomorrow, because we need a social media takeover, man. We should be on every platform because there are people on every platform, and Jesus loves people.
That is so good. And I'm going to start looking for my Joshua now. That's so good. I need a t-shirt that says, "Who's your Joshua?" But I think a lot of times what the church starts to do over history, at least, we think of different ways to evangelize and we start to use it, and then we turn them inside ourselves. The Catholic Church in medieval times, they had stained glass windows facing outward so people that couldn't read could hear or could see the gospel. Then they turned them inwards to look at their own artwork because they liked how it looked, and they lost track of their vision. And I think that's just one of the many mistakes that churches are making today. But with the pandemic, most churches have at least experimented online. What are some of the mistakes you see churches making, and what are some of the missed opportunities you think we could be exploiting?
Well, I think it all kind of starts with your belief system, because your beliefs and your convictions influence what you think about, influences your actions. It influences what you end up doing. And one of the big ones is you can't do church online. Church was not meant to be online. It's not a substitute for the in-person gathering. And I would say, well, I don't know who's arguing that it is. But as soon as you say you can't do church online, then you have just created your own limitation that God did not create. You have set up your own limitation because you decided you can't do church online.
Wow.
It's kind of like, not to get into a touchy aspect of, say, something like women in ministry, but women in ministry, I know there's different denominations that have different beliefs, and certain people that come to a conclusion about women in ministry, they literally say, for whatever, that women can't be in ministry, or should it be on the pulpit, or should it be teaching? Should it be doing the works of the ministry per se, which especially would be insane, because assuredly we would probably agree they could all be at least deacons. But totally. Without getting off on that tangent, you could study David Yonggi Cho and the revival he's led of one of the largest churches through small groups throughout Asia, and it was primarily spread by women. So was it the fact that whole movement was just some rebellious anti-God movement? Not at all. It was that, number one, they were available, and they were the ones in that culture who house to house connected. So the point being is, meanwhile, somebody creates something of dogma, or something of, not to get edgy here, but something of that could even sound pharisaical, or like the Sadducees would do. They create a law, they create a rule that just says things need to look a certain way, and therefore build up boundaries on their own possibility, I believe, of reaching people. It's kind of like, Jesus said, your basically adherence to the law nullifies the word of God. Like, you nullify God's power by your adherence to, again, religious laws that right. God never set up himself. I would agree with you that the church is the ecclesia that should meet in life on life, flesh on flesh, in person, house to house, the ability to lay hands on someone and commission them into ministry. Absolutely. Like, I don't think anyone's disagreeing with that. But at the same time, I believe God's big enough that we could have churches in Ready Player One VR. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, I think if the now we're getting weird.
I know my goal
If
for
the
2021.
Machines scorch, right? If the machines scorch the sky, Matrix, and we have to be underground, and the only way we can interface is because we're in a VR world, like Ready Player One. Guess what? People could still hear the gospel, and you could communicate to their brain and their soul through a machine and through a computer. So I think what happens is we get into these ideals, we get into these things, the way we wish it would be, or the way we want things to be, and so all that to say is I think that's the first thing, is like willing to start the journey of thinking different and being open to the way things could look. And here's what's fascinating is the pandemic for a lot of pastors was the wake-up call, because it wasn't until they actually were forced to lock down their church. I remember I was doing coaching with a pastor who also has a leadership ministry. And he goes, honestly, bro, he had a couple campuses. I hadn't even thought about being online up until the pandemic happened, and it was my only option. And this was in 2020. And I was like, for a moment, I was shocked. I was aghast. Like, I was like, wait a minute. It's 2020 and you haven't even thought about being online?
Wow.
What do you mean you haven't even thought about it? But he hadn't. And yet, as the world shifts, there was the ministries that moved quickly, that weren't slowed down by potentially religion that we don't even find actually reinforced in Scripture, were the ones that moved quickly, saw the opportunity to reach inside people's homes when the lockdowns and mandates happen, and even reach internationally. I think also it's being anchored in knowing that revivals have passed. However you feel about TBN or Daystar today, they have reached over country lines and have seen hundreds of thousands of people come to Christ in nations that have been priorly unreachable.
Yep.
Radio was an explosion of missions. TV was an explosion of missions. The printing press was an explosion of missions. That was technology as well. So do we need a lot of wisdom to steward it? Yes. A lot of people I respect, or a pastor I respect, was talking about how social media quote cards do not replace discipleship. Social media 30-second sermon clips do not replace discipleship. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, amen.
Yeah.
But we should also do social media quote cards, and we need that same good on there as well. And I think that this moment in history is primed for young leaders like yourself and those listening of any age, listening to this, young at heart leaders, willing to embrace, behold, I do a new thing. Do you not see it? Do you have eyes to see what God is doing in this day and age, and to work out the issues? Could social media be used for radical levels of discipleship? It already is.
Yep.
It's simple. It's not. It's like money. Money is not the root of all evil. The love of money is. Money is a tool. Social media is not the root of all evil. It is a tool. Does it come with dangers? Yes. Is there things we need to be aware of in terms of whether it could be a distraction or addictive to children or adults? Sure.
Right.
But it also is a tool. So we need leaders and men and women of God that have wisdom to leverage these new tools in creative ways to extend the gospel in ways that none of us have seen before, and to perpetuate revival on the earth.
Yeah, and you can't tell me that revival can't happen online, because we have seen testimony after we're just a small church from the backwoods of North Carolina, and someone messages us after watching one of our messages, and he was a Buddhist and a drunk, bad drinker. I mean, his life was going down hard. Contacted us, everything got turned 180. He is now living for Christ. He is a certified, I'm not saying, pray this after me, done, check, we got another one on the list. I'm saying we're still in contact with him now in Louisiana. I mean, and the same thing is happening everywhere else across the world. So you can't tell me that that can't happen online, because it already has. And Paul was talking with the church at Corinth, and he was telling them that there are people in your area that are preaching that Christ actually didn't raise from the dead, and there are people that are believing them. I speak this to your shame. He was kind of blowing them out of the water for not talking about what needed to be talked about. And I think that's kind of where we're at in the church today, where we're separating the men from the boys now. Are you going to be online or are you not going to be online? And you can make that decision yourself based off of what the Bible even says. I mean, the Bible talks more about social media than people realize, but that's another sermon for another day, I guess. But I think my next question is, most churches are already posting at least once a week, but what are some other kinds of content that they can post that can generate more engagement? Because we already have, Sunday morning messages, maybe Wednesday night Bible studies, but is there something else we could be doing that could be getting more engagement and reaching more people?
I like that you said the word engagement, because what we've also learned about Instagram, Facebook, and platforms like that, LinkedIn even, engagement, Twitter, engagement is more than just views. It's not just exposure to your post or even likes. In fact, let's define what engagement is on Instagram. Some of the best engagement signals are save. If they click the save button. So we all just want likes, we want a lot of people to like it. But save shows me that you've given me, most people click save on something that's a utility or something that's really quality. Like they might click save on like a at-home workout they could do, but they might click save on like a carousel of verses for when you're feeling anxious, because it's something they want to return to time and time again.
Yeah.
A comment is a higher level of engagement. And Facebook said specifically on Facebook that they want conversations to happen. So if anything promotes more than just like a quick like, but actually promotes conversation and interaction and something that could trigger somebody leaving a comment, that's another form of engagement. Of course, like is one as well. And did you know that also dwell time is being studied by Instagram and Facebook? They study how much time the algorithm is watching if someone stops and reads something or stops and stares at something. Carousels, which is when you could put up to 10 images on Instagram and people can swipe through them, that is also dwell time. It's an engaging action for them to swipe and not keep scrolling past it. So they might not even save it or leave a comment, but if they dwell on it for 3 minutes reading every panel, then Instagram still might suggest that user more of your posts, because they go, okay, for some reason they didn't like it, but they definitely spent some time dwelling on this. But the most important form of engagement in terms of growth on Instagram is the share button, is the little paper airplane button, which as a minister in church creative arena, think about what you could do that could be shared, that would be shareable, that maybe your Instagram followers from your church would want to share with their friends or post and share on their stories. Because if it's shareable, and maybe it's something that comes from an apologetic angle or something that comes from a bridge building angle, it's important to know who you're talking to. And if you give your church a utility that they could share as just a way to illuminate the truth about Christ or the Bible or something, then maybe somebody clicks that share button as well. So understanding how the platforms work could help inform your content strategy in terms of what content you post and you produce. And the final couple of practical ideas would be things, this might sound basic, but would be posts that maybe encourage people to share a prayer request, ask a question. Asking a question is one of the best things you could do on social media. What's one of your favorite verses? What is a prayer request you have? I think also don't make things always so spiritual. On your Facebook church page, you're always pushing out a message. It may not get a ton of engagement. You'd be surprised if you say, the Bible encourages rest, and you share a verse and you say, but you lead with, what's one thing you're planning on doing this summer? Let us know. And people, the key here is you want to make it easy. Even if you go, what's your favorite verse? They might be like, John
3:16.
John 3, I think it's John 3:16. For God, so I don't know. And if they have to stop and think about it, they're probably not going to post it, but they definitely know what they're doing this summer. And just maybe something that passes a question off to them, or gives them a form of engagement, or asks for the question below. So I hope some of those things could help trigger some creative ideas. My friend Brady Shearer also does a lot of cool content in regards to church communications. And he has this whole movement called Seize the 165, because I think there's 166 hours in a week or something like that. And I don't know if I said the name right, but it sees the other hours during the week, because most people are going to be at your church for 1 hour, so sees the rest of the hours. And social media is that chance to do it. So how can you include final list, scripture? Well, let's go with the basics of church, right? It's mainly, as any pastor, we want our church to spend time in the Bible. We want them to spend time praying. We want them to spend time worshiping. And we probably want them to spend time sharing their faith. There's 4 buckets. How can you inspire and encourage and urge people on to good works throughout the week?
Yeah.
Share a Spotify playlist, an easy way for them to get to some good music. Boom. Now, and remember too, I mean, this is discipleship. We all want the crowds. That's a hello. That's like a big one. Like we all want, like, oh, we want the post to go viral. Like, dude, if you post a post and it gets 16 likes and 2 comments, but 2 of the people that look actually, instead of dwelling in anxiety and turning on some death metal and deciding to come home and like cuss their family out, they took a pause and were like, you know what, I'm gonna go worship today. And they actually, 2 people turned on that Spotify playlist, listened through a couple songs. It shifted their spirit. They went home and instead, because the Holy Spirit moved on their heart, repented to their wife and hung out with their kid. Like, that's discipleship, man. That's not maybe the multitudes, but that's the people that are left over.
Yeah.
And Jesus are like, you gonna leave too, or you gonna eat my flesh and drink my blood, like, hitting people. So like, it could be worship, it could be maybe Bible reading, something to inspire, make the Bible accessible, and it could maybe be something like a lot of doorways could open for evangelism by not being so intense about evangelism, but maybe just encouraging people. Like, who's somebody you could text and pray for right now? Like, give somebody a tool, like real practical. Like, hey, church, take a moment, take 2 minutes on your lunch break today and text one person an encouraging word. The Bible says encourage one another daily, why it's still called today. So if you can just move your church to be doing this stuff and leveraging social media for that, those are some very practical things you could do throughout the week in addition to just sharing the message.
Definitely. And there are several different things. I actually was able to go to Grow with Video Live 2020. For those of you that don't know what it is, I think we'll talk about that in just a second. We've got several more questions lined up, but I was at Grow with Video and I remember Pat Flynn was speaking. Pat Flynn, amazing guy, has a ton of great content on his YouTube channel. I will have him linked up in the description below as well. I think he's a valuable resource. And he brought up something I had never heard before. He said he does this weekly. He will go through his recent Instagram followers and shoot them a quick little message like, hey, Sean, thank you so much for following us and getting connected. If you need anything, let me know. I'm here. I'm here to answer questions. Pray. For those of you that are watching in churches, I'm here to pray with you. If you need prayer, just let us know. And that's a direct message, a DM on Instagram that is going straight to their phone. And that's powerful. That's another form of content, I guess, that's reaching one person. And that's really how to build something. Now, in just a minute, I'd like to get into the weeds a little bit and talk about money. But some of y'all just watching, I felt you get nervous. Don't be afraid. Don't get nervous. It's just money. But first, let's talk about Growth Video Live a little bit. Growth Video Live is coming up in 2021. What kind of stuff you got planned for that, and how can people learn more?
Yeah, Grow with Video Live is our annual event to really, YouTube is our main push of the event, or our main promise to help people grow their influence with YouTube. And then the other social platforms, in our view, is to support that. Or, here's even a utility. I view YouTube as the top of the pyramid. And you can use a tool like Repurpose House. And that's maybe something that some churches would benefit from. couple $100. I mean, like as much as $500, $600, $700, $800 a month. There's different plans. That's like the unlimited plan, like a piece of content every day. You give them time codes of your other video content, and they'll cut it out in your branding with a headline, closed captions, and now you can upload that content wherever you want. My point is, we believe YouTube, and we use Repurpose House. So like on my Instagram, when you see the closed captions and you see the thing, we submitted a full-length video from YouTube to Repurpose House, and they chopped out like a 2-minute clip or whatever. Grow with Video Live, we talk about what's working on YouTube, how to grow your influence, your income, and your impact with YouTube, and then also how to extend that influence with YouTube. We're actually the only YouTube conference that I know of now, because a lot of the other quote-unquote video marketing conferences are trying to be experts at all the different platforms. And we are narrowing down to be primarily YouTube first. So it's coming up September. We're dialing in some dates, so it's not set yet. But growwithvideolive.com, 2 days, virtual only this year as well. And in the future, we'll be in person again, but especially with everything that's going on. So really accessible and easy to get to. Super affordable as well for like a virtual pass. And there's a couple different levels if you want the recordings. But yeah, we have surprise guest speakers. And I think that it's just like your experience. I mean, you got a lot out of the event, but I think, you know, there's a ton of lifelong leaders are lifelong learners. And so as a church communicator, you've got a lot of day-to-day things to do, a lot of pressure, a lot of, you know, keeping up on your learning can be hard to do. Let us do it for you. Outsource learning the latest and best practices and learning how to use these tools to grow your church's influence, your ministry's influence. And yeah, if you want to learn more, growwithvideolive.com.
Yeah, I'll have that linked up in the description below. It was cool because at Grow with Video Live, I was not the only church media director there. There were other people from churches that were excited about learning, and it was great to get in that community. Get in a Zoom room with Miss Melissa Caputo. Shout out to the great Melissa Giveaway Fairy, I think is what she's also called. But it was such a great community, awesome people. But now, as promised, to get into the weeds a little bit, money. A lot of people don't like, a lot of churches at least don't like to talk about money because it is a very sketchy territory, but you got to have funds for the mission. You got to fuel the mission somehow. So what is the best ways for churches to make money online through YouTube or other platforms?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest thing is influence comes first, income comes second. So my best answer to the question is in the traditional way. The worker deserves his wages, you know, don't muzzle the ox while he's treading out the grain. So it is through reaching believers. Sure, you could also see God do miracles and maybe somebody whose heart's stirred, but the Pauline ministry model was making tents, which I honor, you know, pastors that are bivocational or work in different jobs. They got that day job and then they're doing their ministry. So there's funding your ministry in other ways because you're doing your tent making. And then eventually you're doing your ministry full time. Your goal is to get a base of donors, of people whose life's impacted, and to cast vision for them. Well, you need somebody to cast vision for. So I think that it's a new school. Old school is like ministry partners and like different levels of ministry partners. But I think I think finding just new ways to do that, people who are blessed and impacted by your online content. The biggest one here probably is making sure your relationship with money is solid and your mindset about money is solid, because you should be unashamed of the gospel, and you should be unapologetic about expecting, just like Paul did. He's like, I actually don't expect anything from you, but I'm giving an invitation for your benefit. You need a biblical worldview about money, about money being donated, about how to communicate that. But I would be bold in I mean, sometimes Paul was like crazy bold. He's like, listen, and you should be supporting me. You ain't, but you should be. Like, you know, it's funny, like you read that in the scripture. So he's communicating clearly that ethic of gathering, people to support the ministry. So saying that, everything starts small. Churches start in a home church with 6 people in someone's house. And it grows from there. Your YouTube videos might get 12 views, and it might be one person who wants to support the ministry at $100 a month, And so I think that's thing one at some point, giving people a way to do things or to invite them or to, ask them to participate. Practically, we could probably move into sort of 2.0 of what some YouTube creators do. And for mission-driven YouTube channels, there are things like Patreon, which is not basically monthly support of creators. And this is used by a lot of creators. I've seen paintball channels do it, any kind of channel. I've seen artists do it, musicians do it. And it's where people support at $5 a month, $10 a month. And again, influence comes first, income comes second. It goes back to this idea. If you could get 1,000 people supporting you at $100 equivalent a year, like $8 a month, that's $600,000. No, it's $100,000 a year. So 1,000 people supporting you at $100 a year is $100,000. And if you thought about that just being your online ministry, you could go a long way with vMix software, a streaming computer, your internet connection, your microphones, whatever else, the tools needed for ministry, plus potentially salaries or whatever else. So things like Patreon, I know some Christian creators that kind of do, they're sort of like personal brands that do Christian. They have Patreons oftentimes is a major platform, which is a particular platform that makes it easy to donate on a reoccurring basis to creators. But then I think the last thing is kind of like things that you're doing. Of course, you have your church's channel, but you've also got your personal channel where you know about things like affiliate marketing, where if you talk about a guitar pedal or a USB microphone or something, and you review that and someone clicks the link and the affiliate link you put in the description, you can make a percentage of that income. And it reminds me of a friend of mine that I used to work with in ministry named Miguel, who was a worship leader, and then he also had a channel about home recording. So him and his wife had a worship EP out, a couple songs, led worship at the church, had a salary at the church, but wasn't making, like, his music wasn't elevation worship. So it wasn't like, Hillsong. It wasn't bringing in any substantial money or even barely any money at all, whether that's Spotify. That's very difficult to do. But what he did was he did a home studio channel and help people with home recording in Ableton software, which, to help listeners, Ableton at the time was $500 on Amazon. So he talked about which is the best version of Ableton as his video. It actually ranked in YouTube search, and because it was a software product, the commission was 10%. So every time someone purchased Ableton at $500, he made $50. Yeah. And that's, I think, a great example of thinking entrepreneurially. And I am a big believer in 2021 and beyond in the pastorpreneur. I think you got to play to your gifts and your skill set. But I know my pastor, he has businesses that offend some people. But like when you're a church planner, man, I mean, critique all you want, but man, you got to figure things out. And what they've done is they've tied it. One of their businesses is a church sign company, and they partner with a print on demand, and his wife's good at design, and so they can help churches just like they did for our church, which created the pop-up signs and the kids ministry sign and the kids, like, and all these different things. They just also turned that in a way creatively to serve others. Another pastor friend of mine was able to get into a particular lease of a building that had kind of an extra building that they weren't going to necessarily need to use, and they were very much in church planning mode. So they were going to sublease the other building as a way to offset costs. I think that I hope nobody would critique that level of thinking. If you do, you're a hindrance to yourself, because you need to think creatively. Planting churches in cities is expensive. Yeah, it is. Even church attendance is suffering some challenges depending on what part of the nation you're in. If you're in Texas, if you're in the Bible Belt, don't critique what someone's doing in Seattle, man. Like, you don't even know. So you got to think about being creative in your local context and find a way. And I believe God will give you wisdom as you also maybe expand your viewpoint and you're open and learn new skills, because I do think that there are some very creative things you can do to earn money for ministry, for your family, so that you can have less of a salary from your church or no salary to start. So listen, so that you can, we go all the way back to maybe hiring somebody to help you with media, and people go, oh, I don't have enough resources. God might drop an idea that gives you the resources needed to fund that expansion of the ministry. And I think that with how complex and expensive the world is today to do certain things, this is the way that kind of the modern minister is thinking.
That is so good. They were accusing Paul of taking up too many offerings. It's fun to read that account with that in mind and thinking about what can I do for the ministry that can generate more income so we can ultimately do more in the community that we're in and online. And now I have 2 questions left, but first, those of you watching, I'd like you to smash that subscribe button and like this video, and comment below if you have any questions or need anything. First, a rapid fire question, just real quick. I want to know what you think. It's 2021. This is a question that everyone has been wanting to know the answer to. What is the best camera for churches and YouTube 2021?
2021, it's something with an unlimited record limit, so you could film the whole sermon. So you're going to probably be on a Sony camera to hit every budget, Sony A6400 or 6600. If the 6100 has an unlimited record limit, you're probably fine there. I think it does. And maybe even a Sony ZV-1, that's a little gnarly, but for $699, $799, for a church to get started as a little live stream tool, a little bit better in low light, and you don't have to buy a
better
lens.
than a phone.
So better than a phone, and you could plug in a proper HDMI, micro HDMI cable and plug that into a cam link or something and stream with it as well. And so unlimited record limit, great autofocus. I'm sticking with one of those Sony cameras. And then fast forward to Sony A7S III. If you want a crazy low light, beautiful. That's what we use at Think Media now. We have creators that are in different states, and so the footage matches. We use a Sony A7S, which is a $3,500 camera just for the body, but it's absolutely beautiful and is remarkable in low light.
Team Sony for the win. That's what I'm talking about. I'm using a Sony A7C right now, 24-70. That's what I'm talking about. But
there you go.
Last question.
Strong.
Thank you. Last question, just to wrap it up. I think this is the most important question we could ask. In 2021, with censorship on the rise, what are some of the emerging platforms that you think are going to rise above the tides in 2021?
Oh, man, I have no idea. I think that, I don't know if Parler made it back, but I know Parler got hammered and kicked off apps. So it's like, here's what I know is that I get it. There is censorship, and without offending listeners. Okay, so is there censorship? Sure. Do almost every platform seem to have probably a liberal bent? Yes. Was the election rigged? Maybe. But at the end of the day, I think there's also a portion where we think we're being shadow banned or our posts aren't reaching people. And it's just because we're not putting out great content, and the content is not, let me put it this way. Conservative news voices like Ben Shapiro or Crowder, they're growing. Like they're doing fine. We're certain videos with COVID in the title or something, little badges are suppressed because of misinformation or whatever. Right. Fact checkers, maybe, or for sure, they certainly were. But I also know that YouTube will also suppress videos that maybe talk about some just more sensitive adult topics. And when you say suppress, they just limit what audience is seeing it.
Right.
I think that it doesn't do us much good to worry about that. You probably know better than me, there's another video platform that's kind of blowing up that doesn't, block things like YouTube. Mm-hmm. But what I do know is that Shapiro is crazy bold and extremely aggressive towards wanting to create liberal tiers in his content.
Yeah.
And he's fine, and he's got sponsors and he's got brand deals. It is sometimes hard if you're a new channel, a new church, and you don't have established authority to sometimes break through the noise or break through like a barrier of your content reaching out there. But I don't know, not necessarily a great answer. Is it absolutely
totally
possible? And hear me, I'm coming from the side of, I understand. Bottom line is this, that like Jesus said, the world hated me, they're going to hate you too at a certain point. And so use the platform for all it's worth. If one day it gets shut down, you get shut down, go somewhere else. Alex Jones, Truth Wars, like whatever. Like, I mean, and so what are you going to do? Like, I think you should diversify your audience. I think you should have people follow you on your email list or somewhere else. And I think you should pray that you can, the word gets scattered like seed on different types of soil, and God's working it out. It lands on rocky soil. At some point, it is our responsibility to travail for people in terms of their discipleship. And at another point, it's scattering seeds, being faithful where we can. And if one door, like the door to Macedonia or whatever, got shut down, so Paul went somewhere else, then just go somewhere else. And I think that sometimes we spend too much energy complaining or worrying about a door being closed, as opposed to pivoting our energy towards which door is open for the gospel next.
Oh, that's so good. And I think it all boils down to being wise as serpents and harmless as doves. We can't just be dumb little sheep out there in the pasture. We need to actually think about these things and, be on the platforms for at least as long as we can, as long as they'll let us. And then even then, be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And if you'd like to learn more about that, I'm going to have more videos coming out on that in the future. So subscribe to this channel. Mr. Sean, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. I appreciate you, bro. Thanks for having me.
This was so good. I'm excited. Subscribe to this YouTube channel for more media tips and tools for churches. Remember, links to all of Mr. Sean's social media is in the description below, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.